Okay, so let's get into today's show. So a few months back, Corey Lindolt was featured as the drink segment on Foodie and the Beast. Now, Corey created the cocktail program for and was named beverage director of Capo, which is a gorgeous little gem of an omakase restaurant that is a collab between Ari Wilder and Adrian Williams. Now, Corey is the bar director for Zeppelin and Capo Makoto. And what we found on Foodie and the Beast was that his knowledge of Japanese spirits and his creativity in cocktails, I was like, this guy needs to talk to me for more than 10 minutes, right? This combo is not enough. So I needed to have him join me on Industry Night. So here's the 411 on Corey. He's been making cocktails in DC for over 15 years. He draws on his background as a professional ballet dancer. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. He incorporates that precision and perfection in dance into each and every cocktail. He has the skills, but most importantly, he has passion. And that passion winds up in every glass. And we're going to get into it right now. Hi.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for coming with me today. It's so nice to have you here. So I do have to mention your ballet because it's so much a part of who you are. How did you go from ballet to cocktails? Like, let's just get the Corey, resume a little bit.
Started dancing with the Washington Ballet at the age of 18. And as we all know, artists don't really make a ton of money, especially in a city like DC. So I needed something to kind of help facilitate living in DC and the lifestyle I wanted to have. So when I was 21, I started bartending. My first spot was at Bossa in Adams Morgan, right next to Madam's.
Yes. That's like a hot salsa place.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know. I have friends who go there on the regular.
Yeah. I would make hundreds of caipirinhas and mojitos a night.
Oh my God, sugar.
Nonstop. Shaking.
Right.
And then a lot of cold drinks, not really cocktails beyond the caipirinhas and mojitos that we were known for. I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved down 18th Street it was L'Enfant, which is now Lucky Buns.
Oh, right, but L'Enfant used to have
La Boom.
Oh my God. So you went from party to bigger party.
I also emceed La Boom.
Oh my God. I feel
bartended
like that's not in your bio. And now I feel like we need to go down a total other rabbit hole.
That one I try to keep a little secret. But that was
But you just let it out.
Yeah. But really, if I wasn't performing on weekends, I was bartending. So La Boom was where I started with cocktails a bit.
So for people who don't know what La Boom is, can we just give them
La Boom was a reservation-only party. It was a brunch party, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday. We had an 8 a.m. and a 2 p.m. So 4-hour turnaround time, 3-hour party. And it was the hottest thing on 18th Street for years. All the neighborhood locals knew about it, and it was really a neighborhood party.
And just to be clear, L'Enfant was so tiny.
It was a little French bistro cafe.
Yeah, but I mean,
right on the corner.
Space-wise, you were smushing people in there.
Oh, packed.
And people just got wasted.
Hammered.
Right?
Hammered. There were games. We'd come at them with water guns full of tequila, dancing, all kinds of unmentionable.
Somebody needs to bring back La Boom.
Oh, it's back.
Where is it?
Now it's, I don't know where they're holding it. It did go to Capital.
Okay.
But they upscaled it. And then they even tried to keep it going during the pandemic with La Boom in a box. So they would do it over Zoom and send you a box with champagne and a bunch of party things.
But they are back. Yeah. I did not know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I should know that. All right.
It's not the same.
No, of course not. No, you can't. They say you can't go home again. And sometimes I feel like you can't recreate things all the time.
It was a time and a place.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So you did La Boom.
Did La Boom and L'Enfant for a while. Then across the street to their Italian concept, Red, White, and Basil. I did that for maybe a summer. And then up the street to Bourbon, which is now Death Punch.
Right. But Bourbon that's a real shift, I think.
Big time.
When you look at what you were doing from just slinging cocktails, not really, slinging drinks.
Yeah.
To serving cocktails.
Yeah.
Right? A big shift. Was that something you wanted to do, or at what point was your interest peaked?
Yeah, absolutely. I think during my time at L'Enfant, I was getting into spirits a little, and I was making my first decent cocktails, reading a lot about it, and out in the city drinking, and just having good drinks and being like, wow, I want to do that. I want to make that. And the owner of Bourbon at the time, James Woods, was a friend of mine. So I lived maybe 3 doors down from it. So that place was my living room. I was in there every night after work, reading, chilling. My dog was in there all the time.
Okay.
I lived there. And I basically just started working for him. And that was where I picked up, all the American classics.
Because at Bourbon, it was a real commitment to the cocktail, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was the first place I saw where, we were juicing every day fresh before shift, prepping all of our herbs, shocking things, really putting some craft and commitment into it, spending the time. And that was where I already loved drinking bourbon, but I hadn't put the time in to really learn about what I loved about it and which kinds that I
So
really
what did you love about it?
Oh God, it's so good.
I know, but if you weren't a bourbon drinker, people just see brown liquor, right? So they see whiskey and bourbon, scotch, like they think it's all the same thing. They just see brown liquor and they're like, I don't like brown liquor.
It's comfort in a glass.
I think. Okay. Let me talk you out of that.
Yeah, I think you have to find what you like. Everyone's palate is different. Some people like a wheated mash bill or like a corn heavy or a rye forward mash bill. For me, something like Weller is just, it's heaven in a glass. Like it's so delicious and warming. Something's a little too hot. You can put a couple drops of distilled water, bring out the flavor profile. But I just really fell in love with the spirit.
Okay. And so did you go on a deep dive of research? Did you start really educating yourself?
That's part of the program there. I mean, the bottle selection was absolutely massive. Okay. So you had to learn, a bit. You had to spend some time. We offered several flights that you had to kind of talk about with your guests. And people would, if they're coming in and asking for $100 glass, you better be able to have, know your stuff. Yeah, you need to have more than just like, this is brown juice. And
right. So then why leave?
It closed. I went down with the ship. By the end, James was hemorrhaging money. I mean, it was 2017 or 2018. And people just weren't going there anymore. It was really a awesome neighborhood spot for a while, but like, so many other bars we know in the city, it had its time and then it was done. And by the end, I mean, it just wasn't staff hanging around and I was going to stay there and see it through.
Right. And so how'd you wind up with the Wilder Brothers? So
after that, I took a couple of years off from the industry. I was really, really doing a lot with the ballet. By then, my tenure there was well established. If I wasn't performing, I was doing, events with donors, that kind of stuff. And really, I just kind of want to take a break from the industry and focus on my ballet career. But, oh man, this is maybe 2020, just post-pandemic. It was really towards the end of the pandemic in July.
You said 2020. Dude, that is the pandemic.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know time has no value.
2020 or 2021, yeah.
Okay, but so how'd you wind up with them?
I ended up in Chaplain's. I had a buddy of mine, Rob, who used to work for Ari at Chaplain's and Zepp, I believe. And I expressed interest getting back in, and he was like, "This is the guy to talk to."
Right.
He's really cool. He's got great spots in Shaw, and he knows my voracious appetite for ramen. So
and their ramen is
that delicious. Was a perfect fit. Yeah.
But at that point, were you, because you're in Chaplin's, you moved to Zeppelin's, and now you're at Capo and Zeppelin's.
Yeah.
And Capo and Zeppelin's are both Japanese inspired. Well, Capo is totally Japanese. But how did you develop a taste and knowledge about sort of Japanese spirits?
The time spent.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had drank some Japanese spirits before. I think I had my first bottle of Yamazaki when I was maybe 26 or so.
Okay.
And I enjoyed it. It wasn't my style of whiskey because I came from a bourbon background, and that's more, malty. But then after that, I found Nika coffee grain, and that I think that's been a lot of American whiskey drinkers' kind of passport to Japanese whiskey, just because the flavor profile is really friendly to an American palate. So then from there, I was like, this isn't so bad. Maybe I'll check out some Japanese spirits. And then really, the time at Zeppelin, it just like at bourbon, you have to do the work and know what you're selling. So
more of the same.
Yeah, just
well,
researching.
And especially if we can give everybody a sort of a little, like, I've talked about Capo on here. I mean, Zeppelin's is a great neighborhood sushi restaurant. It's terrific. The sushi is amazing. The drink program is terrific. If I lived in Shaw, that would be my go-to. Like, I totally get the space. And you do have a great cocktail program there. But Capo is on another level altogether. It's just this little gem of a restaurant, reservations well in advance. How did you go about, because Zeppelin is not just Japanese spirits.
No.
But what is it like at Capo? Like, can we talk about sort of how you put together the cocktail program at Capo?
All right, I wanted to keep it to Japanese spirits only. I do carry a rye and a bourbon, and of course, 2 tequilas, a mezcal, a cognac, but everything else is Japanese. And my entire program, with the exception of one drink, is Japanese spirit based. And that's to kind of honor, what Capo Makoto is. We want it to be authentic. We owe that to our guests. And I think there's so much you can do with Japanese spirit. People think Japanese spirit and they think whiskey. But really, no, there's amazing Japanese gin. You have shochu, you have sake, of course. There's Japanese rum that is outstanding.
Wow. All right. Well, let's go back a little bit and give everybody sort of, like you said this, like if you start with American brown liquor, let's just differentiate the difference between a bourbon, a whiskey, and I guess just bourbon and whiskey. Scotch is just from Scotland, right?
Yeah, I mean,
So what's the difference between a bourbon and a whiskey?
Scotch and bourbon are both whiskeys. They fall into the whiskey family. But bourbon,
what are they made of?
It depends. So, you have different grains. Bourbon, for example, needs to be 51% corn mash. So you have corn, but you can also have wheat. You can have rye. You can have barley. Scotch is predominantly, I believe, barley. So it's really just regionality. I mean, you're using the grains.
Then what makes it bourbon? What's the difference?
So produced in Kentucky or Tennessee, aged a minimum, I believe.
But is that also 51% corn mash?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it needs to be at least 51% corn mash,
for
Kentucky
bourbon.
or Tennessee, and it's because of the limestone water, aged in new charred oak American barrels. So it's bylaws that kind of govern and dictate what classifies something as a straight bourbon versus an American whiskey or like a mixed bourbon.
Okay, that's fascinating. So it's really all the same thing.
Yeah,
it all starts with the same thing.
It's grain spirit, and then it's getting its color from what it's aged in. The flavors coming from what grains you're using.
Okay, so when you talk about people expanding their palate and moving to Japanese spirits, I know they have other spirits other than their whiskeys, but it is the most popular. That was the big push initially, even more than sake, right? Like the whiskey was a huge push here in the United States.
Yeah.
So can we talk about how their whiskey is done? What are the tenets of Japanese whiskey? I
mean, like everything else in Japan, perfection. Everything is done to perfection. And that's, a lot of it is done in more of a Scotch style. So you have a lot of their whiskeys are, pretty malty and fair amount of peaty as well, kind of.
So are they
like
using peat like they do in Scotland?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is why when you're going for introducing an American whiskey drinker, which is like a sweeter palate, to Japanese, you kind of want to go for something that has, either a honey profile, vanilla profile, something like Toki might be a little too malty, not quite sweet enough, but that's why like the Nika coffee grain, beautifully sweet. And then what I'm featuring today, Takamine.
Okay.
It is
so
incredible.
beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so you did bring. Why don't we bring these over here? So
Yeah.
you brought a bunch of spirits with you today. I assume all of these are at Capo, right?
Yes.
So what did you bring in? Tell me.
Let's see. So this is from Fukuoka Prefecture. These are both from Kagoshima. So this is Komasa Gin.
Okay.
This is made on a volcanic island from the world's smallest Satsumas.
Ooh.
So it's one of 3 botanicals, and you have Satsuma, coriander, juniper. That's it.
Okay.
And it is a beautiful gin. This is actually going into one of my new cocktails at Capo relatively soon.
Okay.
And it's the spirit that I featured for Negroni Week last year at Zeppelin. It is gorgeous.
Okay. And what is it like? How did you find it? It sounds like it's so boutiquey. So how did you go out finding it, and how do you get it here?
So I found it through one of my liquor reps. Really? Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So through one of my liquor reps, really that's where you find a lot of the good stuff. Either that or being out and about.
So this does not have a strong smell.
It's
delicate.
Floral. I would say it's perfumed.
Yeah, it's floral, but there's no burn. You know how most times when you have a gin and you smell it, it burns your nose.
That's from I think a lot of gins are
I'm pouring myself
well over botanicalized. There's too much stuff going on. Thank you, Nikki.
Of course.
And this gin is actually, like, you can drink this straight. This is delightful. It's very, very light on the palate. You're going to get all of that really sweet Satsuma orange out of the front. And these are actually, so a really cool thing about this, one of the reasons why the oranges are so sweet, the Satsumas are so sweet, is because it is an active volcano. So there's ash constantly pouring down. So they have developed really, really, really thick skins.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Well, it makes me think of, like, I love wines from Mount Etna. Right now, it's not active, but that a really good Mount Etna red will have like an ashy aftertaste, and there's something about that, and I'm like, this is so good.
I have 2 Mount Etna wines at Zeppelin, and I agree. Yeah, it's delightful.
Yeah, they're amazing wines. Brent Kroll is the first one who poured me one like 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was like, I think you guys are going to like this. And then it's become like our favorite wine. We just love it. So there are a lot of orange notes in there.
Yeah. I mean, I really think that everything on that nose, there is a touch of coriander, but everything on that nose is the Satsumas, and that predominant flavor that you're getting is the Satsuma. That's why it was so good in the Negroni that I did.
Okay, because it pulled on those orange flavors. So, like, let's talk about mixing this, because this does have an incredible flavor profile, and it almost seems ashamed to cover it with anything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you go about putting together a cocktail that allows the spirit to shine?
So a couple of ways. I have a rule with cocktails for any bartenders I'm helping develop anything, or just for myself, no more than 5 things. That's it.
Okay.
And even 5 is kind of pushing it. I like to keep the story simple, right? You're trying to tell a story. You're trying to say something. And if you put too many things in it, it's going to be jumbled and muddled and kind of indirect. Another way is I messed with the build. I mean, standard Negroni it's 1 to 1 to 1.
Right. Yeah. That's my problem really with a Negroni.
Really?
Because I find they can be really, really syrupy because of the Campari.
Yeah.
And it's just so, like, I know it's bitter, but the bitterness doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
It's the sugar, the sweetness. I'm like, the viscosity of it is unappealing, personally.
You could have them stir it a bit longer or cut back. for the, I called it the orange dog Negroni.
Okay, I see why.
And well, it's also the biggest predator to these Satsumas is a caterpillar called the orange dog.
Oh, no kidding.
So
isn't that funny?
that's why I chose it. But I did an ounce and a half of the Komasa gin, and then changed it up 7.5 Aperol to help play with the orange here, and then Montenegro instead of sweet vermouth. Montenegro for its floral qualities. Sure. Yeah.
That makes a lot
of sense. And it was delightful. It was that all of the spirits worked in harmony to tell the same singular story. And it was simple and beautiful.
It sounds good.
And I really love the spirit.
Okay, so how is it featured now? Are you using it now?
So at Zeppelin, I do a fair amount. I'd say at this point, half of my cocktails that I make are customs. Like when I'm there, my regulars know I'm there, and it's a lot of, all right, Corey, what are we doing today?
Right. So you're making a lot of things on the fly.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, because I'm not a classic cocktail drinker. Like you came in studio, you poured us drinks. I loved all of that. But when I go out and I look at a cocktail menu, I'm completely overwhelmed. It's overwhelming. I know more about what I don't like than what I do like. And I look at a cocktail menu, and to me, my head goes to sugar. I'm like, I don't want anything sweet. I like brown liquor, but so much brown liquor has a lot of sweetness to it.
Yeah.
And I just don't want that. And I like gin, but I feel like everybody wants to make things sweet. There's always like juice in it, or I'm like, I don't want any of that. Do you know what I mean? Which is why I wind up drinking wine and champagne.
I'm a bitter boy. I love my bitter drinks.
Okay.
I think the first cocktails I really fell in love with were the Negroni and the Boulevardier. But I agree with you. I think there's way too much sugar being used in everyone's cocktail programs right now, unless you have, some of the really talented people that are doing stuff really well. Like Will Patton,
Sure.
But yeah, I agree. Sugars, I much prefer sour. I much prefer bitter.
Yeah, I'm more bitter, or actually, I love a little spice.
Yeah.
I love like a peppery note to something.
Yeah.
I think that's so like unexpected and yummy.
Yeah.
It tastes so good.
The cocktails I made for you guys when you came in.
Yeah.
That's the spirit that you get the spice from there. Chacho, it's a Barley Aguardiente aged with jalapenos.
Yes, I had them on Foodie and the Beast.
Yeah,
they're
outstanding. Actually, as soon as I saw that product, I knew I needed to put that on menu at Capo, because I saw it when I was in my R&D process for Capo, and that's how the Color con Leche came about. Really.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's move on from gin.
Okay.
What is the next thing you brought in?
The next is Mugi Hoca. This is it's basically a toasted barley shochu. You have a 17-day fermentation, which is pretty long, and 5 years aging in ceramic casks. This is a shochu that I think has a pretty unique flavor profile. You almost get like dark chocolate notes, toasted cereal grains like Cheerios.
Can we give people who are not familiar with Shochu? Can we talk about what's in Shochu, how it differs from sake, and why you would want to drink Shochu? So
you have, I guess, a good distinction tying back to the bourbon and whiskey. Like soju is Korean. Soju is only made with rice. Shochu is Japanese. That can be made with rice. Sweet potato is actually very common. Like I've got some great sweet potato shochus at Zeppelin.
Okay.
Or barley in this case. And again, it's a distilled grain spirit. And what you'll find on this is it almost smells like Cheerios, right? But in a good way.
Right.
And
it's malty. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's got these roasty, toasty notes. And as soon as I had this, I was like, this is going to be in my 2-to-1 martini at Capo.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
do you get a lot of... So when you say 2-to-1 martini...
Yeah.
you're using this in place of gin or vodka, correct? No, you're using this instead of vermouth.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'm doing 2 ounces of Roku gin,
Okay.
which is a 6 botanical, pretty dry style Japanese gin, to 1 part this. And I finish it with shiso bitters and a shiso blossom as the garnish, which is, they're beautiful. It's like if you ever had a basil plant and let it go to...
No, shiso leaves are my, like, I'm always disappointed when I go for sushi and there's like one shiso leaf as, you know, like decor. I love to wrap the fish.
Yeah.
With shiso
it's
leaves.
Delicious.
Oh my God, it's so herbaceous.
Yeah.
It's like what basil should taste like, honestly.
Yeah.
Like that's how I feel
I
about
agree.
it. Like especially the texture. I'm a huge shiso fan. So,
Yeah.
so I love that you're pairing this. But so when people come in and you say that, what's the reaction?
By the end of it, people always love it.
Okay.
They generally love this martini.
Twist some arms.
But yeah, I mean, for some people, hearing 2 to 1 is it's a deal breaker because I mean the Martinez martini has gone through a wide spectrum of phases.
Right, and it's not 2 to 1. It's like a hint of
now. I mean, now it's an in and out.
Right.
People don't really like martinis. They like hyper chilled gin or hyper chilled vodka. Like that's if you're not using any vermouth, it's not a martini to me. Like the component of the aromatized wine is what makes it a martini. And so you had people, it was originally 2 to 1 and then, you know, it would go to like 4 to 1, 6 to 1, in and outs.
Right.
But people call for an extra dry and you're like, okay, how much vermouth would you like? None. Right away with your chilled vodka.
Okay. Okay, so I'm fascinated by that because to me, I don't know how somebody just drinks like chilled vodka.
Yeah, no.
Like, it's not that good.
I mean,
even a good vodka. And listen, this gin is delicious, but I want an ice cube in it. Do you know what I mean? I want it on the rocks.
Yeah.
I could sit with that for a while. But to me, it's not like having a glass of wine. Do you know what I mean? So I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah.
But so when you introduce this martini, where people are like, oh, all right, dude, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is a very, I think, different twist, spin on the martini. To my knowledge, no one has done a 2 to 1 with gin and shochu.
Right.
So it's pretty unique. And honestly, it's my most self-indulgent cocktail on the menu. Like, this is the martini I want to drink.
Okay.
So I made it, and it's delightful. I have it diluted to an exact 21% because 20 was too dry, 22 was too diluted.
So when you're talking about the percentage, is that based on the gin you're using?
By volume.
Okay.
So I do a large batch of it, measure out the gin, the shochu, the amount of water, and then it goes in the freezer, and I keep it super chilled. Of course, it doesn't freeze, but I keep it as cold as possible because that's how a martini should be served.
Right.
And then I pour out the measured amount, garnish it with the shiso bitters and the shiso blossom, and it's ready. It's good to go.
It's just good to go.
It's perfect.
Now, let me just ask one question. I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but when it comes to gins, especially gin drinkers with their martinis or gin in general, there's a big difference between London Dry and Plymouth. Yeah. And I have a friend who is a specific gin drinker, and everybody tries to get him to drink. They're like, oh, you should try this gin. And I'm always like, you're not going to like it.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between the two? And how does this particular, I don't understand it. So where does this particular gin fall?
To put it simply, your London Dries are juniper forward. That's going to be your main botanical. And then instead of like a London Dry and saying like Plymouth, I would say like something like Hendrick's, which is a very botanical.
Okay.
And I would call this a botanical gin.
Okay.
You know, it does contain juniper, but the predominant note is the Satsumas. So it's it's
fruity.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, rather than just that bracing juniper, which has a place. for sure. But that's not my style of gin.
Okay, I get it. All right, what's the last thing you're pouring me?
The last one, Takamine 8.
Okay.
This is my favorite whiskey.
Of all time, period? End of story?
My favorite whiskey I can get regularly.
Okay.
I would say my favorite is Eagle Rare 17 year.
Okay.
But that's become almost impossible to get.
So tell me about this. Where is it from?
So this is actually the first Japanese whiskey, and it was made in Peoria, Illinois by Jokichi Takamine, 1894, which I believe is the year that the godfather of Nikka whiskey was born.
Okay.
So there is contention about this, but technically this is the first Japanese whiskey. And it wasn't even
ever?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to ask, like, at what point did whiskey start being made in Japan? Because whiskey...
People, I think, credit it to Nikka, but that's because this story was kind of lost and forgotten. So Jokichi Takamine was a brilliant chemist. He was the first person to synthesize adrenaline. So the EpiPen, that's him. Ooh. And the crazy thing is he figured out how to inoculate barley with koji bacterium, the same bacterium used to ferment sake.
Okay.
So he wasn't malting his barley. He inoculated it with koji, which is where there's this sweet floral nose on it, and the back end, I think, has a touch of funk. This is as American as bourbon and as Japanese as any other Japanese whiskey. I think it has this awesome dichotomy.
So the sweetness is not from the barrel or the char.
You're getting it from the barrel, but I think a lot of it's attributed to the koji.
Okay. So is this still made in America?
So basically, his distillery was burned down in the early 1900s because American whiskey makers were worried that this was going to change everything about American whiskey. Koji production was a lot cheaper to do, and they didn't want the competition, especially from, someone who wasn't a national.
Right.
So burned down his distillery, sent him packing. He went back to Japan.
That is so terrible. I can't even believe. I mean, obviously I believe it because that's what this country is like, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and this story was lost to history for a very long time. But he came back as a goodwill ambassador. He's actually responsible for the cherry blossoms in D.C.
Really?
Yeah.
So then who brought back the whiskey?
His family. His family did. I want to say this came on market only a couple of years ago. I haven't been hearing about it.
Okay.
But one of my reps, the same rep who brought me Mugi Hoca, she showed me this, and I fell in love with it immediately. I will argue that this makes the best old-fashioned.
Why? All right, let's talk about old-fashioned.
The flavor profile. I mean, you have these beautiful caramelized burnt sugars.
Right.
There is vanilla. There is this dark roasted caramel, and then this weird floral component that does not exist in American whiskey. And I just think that in combination with some bitters, sugar, you're set. You're good to go.
Okay, but so let's talk about old-fashioned. So what's in a classic old-fashioned?
If I'm at home, I'm doing it with a Demerara cube and Ango bitters, 2 dashes Ango, 1 dash orange. Muddle it up with just enough water so that it kind of dissolves. And then 2 ounces of bourbon and a big old cube.
And that's it?
That's it.
Okay.
In bars, you see them made with simple syrup. I tend, if I'm doing it at a bar...
That's probably why...
It's too sweet.
I don't like it.
Yeah. So for mine at Capo, I use Demerara syrup, just because I think it has this... It's not a saccharin. It has a richer backbone. Like, it is still just as sweet, but it has this depth and richness to it that I think is missed when it's just standard simple. And really, you should be using no more than a 1/4 ounce.
Okay.
That's it. And then you've got the terrible monstrosities of old fashions that are when people muddle oranges and cherries and all of that awful stuff.
Right.
It just has no place in an old fashioned, but thankfully, that's been left to, other regions or left in the 80s.
Okay, which is good.
Yeah.
But now, But when I was at Capo,
Yeah.
you did a Wagyu fat washed old fashioned.
Yeah.
So what's the addition of fat? What is the point of that? I mean, the cocktail was amazing.
Yeah.
And it's, like I said, I don't normally order old fashions, but I loved what it did to the drink, but I don't know what it did. So can you explain it to me?
So essentially fat washing is when you effectively wash the liquor with a fat. Basically,
so you're washing the liquor, not the glass?
No, the liquor.
Okay.
Yeah, because you don't want to have fat in the cocktail itself.
Okay.
Unless that is your intention, but that was not for this. So basically, we had all of this extra Wagyu fat trimmings at the restaurant, and along with me, one of my tenets of bartending is like fewer ingredients. Another one is less waste, and so all of this beautiful fat. So I asked Chef if I could have it, and I rendered it down, filtered it out. I bring the whiskey up to temp in bottle. In a sous vide, just so that once the fat hits it, it doesn't solidify.
Sure.
So you need it to remain liquid. And then for about an hour, I use a whisk every 3 minutes to wash it until it's almost foamed. So you're effectively getting as much contact with the whiskey and fat as possible.
Okay.
Then you pop that into the freezer. The fat becomes a solid raft.
Mm-hmm.
Pull that off, and then you filter the whiskey through, and then that is your fat washed whiskey.
Okay, but what does it add to the whiskey?
Texture, a certain viscosity.
It feels like it.
Sweetness.
To me, it feels like it clarifies it. It makes it like, I feel like the fat sort of pulls out stuff. Because I don't find that cocktail really sweet.
Yeah, because I'm not using sugar.
Okay, maybe
I've got the tiniest bit of Demerara in it, but because the Wagyu fat is so sweet and nutty itself, I don't need to add sugar. Yeah,
right.
I use by volume 10% of the Demerara, which is really not a lot at all. And I also pre-dilute. That goes to 15% or so. So there just really isn't a lot of sugar in it. It's not necessary. You have this rich, nutty sweetness that the fat imparts. So, and that's kind of the point of fat washing. It gives flavor, it gives texture and viscosity. People do olive oil fat washing.
I was going to say,
delightful.
It is. And you're seeing it a lot, especially in Mediterranean restaurants, with some za'atar, put in there. It is really delicious. Yeah. And it does add something. It's an umami, really, to a cocktail that you're not used to, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's kind of exactly it. A lot of people don't expect or think they want salt in a cocktail, but it's just like cooking. That's kind of why I got into this. I started cooking when I was a very young man. I moved out of home when I was 15. And so I have always loved cooking, and that's a balance game. That just applied to making cocktails for me.
That makes sense. Yeah. Right. I mean, yes, what salt can do for a dish is unbelievable.
A little bit of MSG in a martini.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about what's next. Like, what comes up? How often are you changing these menus? Like, how often are you doing things? And you also mentioned something that I don't know. If you're not in the industry, you're batching your cocktails.
Yeah.
So why?
There is absolutely no way to keep up with the volume without it.
Even in a 30-seat restaurant?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, if I were to do it by hand, 2-drink order for the cocktails that I have at Capo, I don't know, you're probably waiting at least 4 minutes, which to me is unacceptable. I think I really only have 2 drinks that I build in glass there. The rest are batched. It's the time. It's also consistency. I want to ensure that if I'm making it or if one of the other staff members is making it, it is the same exact product.
Sure.
And I can only really get that oversight if I'm the one building the batch, making it, knowing exactly when it was made, how, everything. So it's a control thing, but in a good way. And honestly, we do that at Zeppelin as well, just because the volume.
Well, the volume at Zeppelin is like at Zeppelin that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know if people really understand the batching process and understand why it can be so successful.
Yeah. So I mean, basically, you upscale your build. So if you've got a drink that is 2 ounces of spirit, an ounce of sour, quarter ounce or 3/4 ounce of sugar, you're scaling that up and building it in Cambros, big 20-liter containers. Generally, I think you want to keep juice components out of a batch unless that batch is going to move in the next
really fast,
3 days. Yeah,
but you could add that in the end,
so
right?
That's what I do at Capo. I batch my spirits, sweeteners, and then I add juice at the end, and we shake or stir.
Okay.
And I think that's the best way to have the freshest product while also maintaining, that consistency and speed.
Okay. And one last question that you mentioned, you talked about a big cube of ice. Ice has become so important in cocktails. Do you guys have an ice service? Do you make your own ice? How does that work?
So there are a couple of big companies that make ice in DC. We use Millie, the ice queen. Everyone knows her. Right. And it's because she is the best. She's got the space to do it, and she's pretty reliable. I don't know. I think a lot of guests don't really realize how important ice is to a cocktail. Right. But when someone gets a glass with this beautiful clear sphere or spear or cube, and they see like, oh my God, look at that ice. It's gorgeous. Right. And then it kind of clicks. But
also they try to do it at home, right?
Yeah,
you can't make a clear sphere.
You can.
Unless
it takes an igloo, and you have to do it the right way, and then you're going to have to cut off what's not clear. Right. It's a pain, and the yield is not worth the time for most people. Right. But it's really important to achieve the correct dilution and temperature and aesthetically, like what you're going for.
Sure. But I just don't know I think if you said to somebody 20 years ago, we're, ordering an ice in a variety of shapes because of the effects on the cocktail, I think you'd get a couple eyebrows raised, right?
We told a bar manager 20 years ago we were paying, sometimes upward of $1 a cube.
Sure.
For these big rocks, they would blow their lid.
Exactly.
But aesthetics have really become a big part of, especially with the Instagram age, everything being social media, the phone eats first. Aesthetics really matter in the drink game now. So it's not just, what it's made from, how it's made, how it tastes. It's got to look good too.
Yeah. All right. So what's up next?
Next up, I guess first would be Capo. We are doing, seasonal menus. So I will pull some of we opened in March, so I'll pull some of the more spring, summer focused cocktails and get going into fall cocktails. I've already started in my, my little black book of ingredients, and I'm just going to start R&Ding, replace a couple of the drinks. That's what's happening. Thing, yeah.
But is there any flavor profiles that speak to sort of Japan in the winter that you're thinking makes sense for Capo in the winter? Yeah. Like I heard you say, like products made out of sweet potato, things of that nature.
Yeah. So right now, my next big thing is going to be a pumpkin cocktail.
Okay, but no spice, right?
No, ma'am.
No judgment, but a little bit of judgment.
So I'm planning to roast pumpkin like you would with squash or sweet potato, and basically make a syrup from that. I will squish down what's left after, dehydrate that and use that as like a chip for garnish.
Oh, cool.
And then roast the seeds and make an orgeat from that. So gonna use the whole thing, hopefully. Right. So there's less waste. I don't want to disclose the spirit or flavor profile too much, but I'm planning on a very fall cocktail. And hopefully I will probably bring the orgeat from Capo to Zeppelin, and release a couple fall cocktails there as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, of course.
Tell everybody where they can find you, shaking your thing, both on Instagram and in the restaurant.
Yeah, so Corey J. Landolt, CoryJLandolt, on Instagram, Twitter. You can find me at Zeppelin Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and at Capo Makoto Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much
Yeah,
for joining
thank
me
you
and
so
bringing
much.
all these delicious things.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you all for joining us today. Such a delicious show. So many new things for you, obviously, to try and places to go. Follow me at NYCCINELLIS on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Threads, and don't forget, you should subscribe to YouTube to watch this show, Industry Night, so you can see all the delicious things that we're tasting here today. I want to thank my guest, Corey, for joining me today, and thank you as well. Everybody be safe out there and have a delicious week.
Produced by Heartcast Media.